take attendance. Chapter 9, International Trade. Kind of interesting, in this textbook, they get into that a little bit in Chapter 2, and then they get into it again in Chapter 9. Well worth a couple chapters, because it illustrates a lot of important points about why we specialize as individuals, as well as why places should specialize, whether they're states or cities or countries. International trade is a little more interesting because it reveals some interesting issues. And so to just kind of enliven things a little bit, let me just start off with a story, and then we can get into some of these slides. The 1980s, yeah, I'm old. In the 1980s, I was doing my first stint as a professor in Hawaii, of all places, in the Big Island. It's an awesome place for a vacation with lava pouring out of volcanoes. And since I'm here, you tell that it wasn't that great of a place to pursue a profession. But anyway, so I lived on the Big Island, and one of the big crops there is macadamia nuts. And I can remember exactly how this happened, but one day I got a phone call from somebody saying, you know, they're starting to train monkeys in South America and Australia to pick macadamia nuts. Of course, you don't have to pay monkeys a wage. We can't compete with that, you know, free labor. We've got to put up trade barriers to protect our macadamia nut industry here in Hawaii. Okay? Because we can't compete with free labor. Now, put yourself in that. And by the way, this special case of Hawaii also illustrates some possible exceptions to the usual arguments for free trade. Well, we'll get into those too. But all right, first, let's say that this person makes this presentation, let's say where the workers are, the macadamia nut workers. He visits them one morning before their shift. Okay, now, you've just been told that you can't compete with a monkey. Isn't that right? That the difference between your productivity picking macadamia nuts and the productivity of a monkey picking macadamia nuts is not enough to justify the difference between your paycheck and the cost of rounding up, training, caging, medicating. See, monkeys aren't free, right? Just because you don't have to issue them a paycheck doesn't mean they're free, right? You gotta find them, you gotta breed them, right? You gotta take care of them, you gotta feed them, you gotta round them up and somehow make them go pick macadamia nuts instead of other things. Okay, but anyway, somebody, just based on the notion that you don't have to give them a paycheck, says, you can't compete with a monkey. You better write your congressman. Yeah. Demand a tariff or a quota on foreign macadamia nuts. All right, so I think we've illustrated one fallacy right there. Just because somebody's labor is maybe cheaper, because you don't have to pay them a paycheck, doesn't mean that A, they're cheaper, or B, a better buy. Right? How many times have you wished you'd paid more for something than you did? Yeah. You went on the cheap and like, whoops, that was pretty expensive on the cheap. Right? It's the same basic idea. Cheaper labor isn't necessarily a better buy. All right, let's take that to the next step. Suppose the monkeys, for whatever reason, really are better at picking macadamia nuts than humans. Something about monkeys, you know, the longer arm, they're really strong. You know, they can jump from tree to tree and you have to walk. Now, so you're writing that letter to your member of Congress. I can't compete with monkeys. Protect me from monkeys. Keep me in a job that a monkey can do better. See, we've illustrated the concept of opportunity cost, sort of. Right? Because if you lose your job picking macadamia nuts, you're going to have to find another job, right? So you're writing your letter to your member of Congress so you don't have to do that, right? Right? So that the price of foreign macadamia nuts goes up for the tariff, tax on imports, so that Americans keep buying domestic, including Hawaiian, macadamia nuts, even though foreign macadamia nuts are cheaper because monkeys are better. Again, supposing monkeys really are better at picking macadamia nuts. So now you're going to be kept, if you're a member of Congress says, yes ma'am, yes sir, we've got to protect you from the monkeys in South America and Australia. We're going to put up that tariff, make sure that foreign macadamia nuts can't compete in the U.S. market because of that tax. Okay, so now you're doing a job instead of something else you could be doing that humans could do that monkeys can't do. Okay, instead you're still going to be picking macadamia nuts, even though monkeys are better at it. Now, that little story, in what sense is that story any different from cheaper labor in another place, humans versus more expensive labor in the United States? What does more expensive mean? Higher opportunity cost. Your employer, when he makes you a job offer and a wage offer, doesn't do it out of the goodness of their hearts. Oh, they need to make a living, I better offer them more money. No. How much do I have to offer them to get them to take this job? A little more than you can make doing something else, right? That's that opportunity cost principle. Okay, so whatever wage that Americans have, picking macadamia nuts or whatever, it signals opportunity cost, something they could be doing, what else they could be doing. Okay, so now you're doing a job that a monkey could do better instead of something that pays just about as well or nearly as well, because that's the basis of your current wage. You see the inefficiency there. Any questions, comments, or thoughts about it, that story? I want you to think a little bit about being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean while you're at it, working in a macadamia nut plantation. Okay, what did I just say about opportunity cost? I said the wage that they're being paid is probably a function of something else they could be doing. No, that works a little better on the U.S. mainland. By the way, if you're ever in Hawaii, don't refer to back in the States. You've just made a bunch of enemies. They're one of the states. Okay, say back in the mainland. Okay, that's cool. Back in the States, that'll get you in hot water there. People are gonna gnash their teeth, and if it's your waiter or waitress, who knows what they'll do to your food, or don't. Anyway, don't do that. All right, so what's the difference between a job on the Big Island, Hawaii, 2,500 miles from the U.S. West Coast, and a job in Texas? Come on. It's early in the week, I know, early in the morning. All questions are not rhetorical. Turn the wheels, think. That's how you remember things. That's how you do better on exams, rather than just being a stenographer. What's the difference between being out in the middle of the Pacific on an island, mostly volcano, lava? I'm trying to remember your name. Eric. I don't know you. I can't remember. I'll give Eric a first. I can remember his name. Where?
Hawaii.
Why?
Because it's farther away, so it would take more to hire somebody from the mainland and make them travel the way to.
Wait a minute. Okay, I'm missing something here. Let me give him a try at it before we. That didn't compute. Okay, give your shot at it.
Less options.
That's what I was thinking. See, in Texas, you have a much broader set of options. If you lose your job picking macadamia nuts, there's a lot of other opportunities out there. If half the Big Island is covered in macadamia nut plantations, and you lose your job picking macadamia nuts on the Big Island, what am I going to do? Well, okay, you could work at a tourist hotel maybe. But anyway, Eric, maybe that's what you meant to say. What's your first name? Johan, okay. Eric, maybe that's what you meant to say, but it didn't compute. Because it sounded like you said the opposite, higher opportunity costs. No, in Hawaii, there are lower opportunity costs. Because there may be zero opportunity cost. Because there may not be another job for you, right? Because you're on an island and there aren't that many other places to shop your labor. The Big Island, by the way, has a population of about 100,000, about a tenth of San Antonio. Okay, so if there's 5,000 macadamia nut pickers, and I don't know what the number is, and that's probably about 20% of the labor force there. And it's going to be hard to find 5,000 people new jobs. Okay, but that's an exception. That's because you're in the middle of an island. Most of the time, the opportunity cost of labor is just about what it's being paid. Whereas in Hawaii, maybe the opportunity cost of labor might be quite a bit lower than what it's being paid. Okay, any other questions, comments, or thoughts? Another interesting illustration from international trade is this notion of dumping. By the way, you have to give the political spinners credit here. And by the way, we're talking strictly efficiency. There are reasons why intelligent people can disagree, but not on the efficiency basis on this issue of dumping. You have to give the political operatives some real credit here. They've changed bargains, which we generally crave, right, into something that people go, oh, gasp, we have to stop that. Stop bargains? Yeah. In one of my other courses, I have a little section on dumping where I found a political cartoon once which has Santa Claus being rousted off of a roof by the cops. That's basically what dumping, anti-dumping means. Santa Claus has arrived and you arrested him and you're prosecuting him. Right? Because see, what is that terrible sounding word for something wonderful defined as in the law? If you sell below your production cost, okay, you, a foreign company, sell below your production cost in the U.S., okay, or, don't gasp too loud, if you all do it at the same time, all the oxygen will go away. Isn't that terrible? Don't we want to prosecute somebody for doing that? Selling below, I mean, they can't keep that up for very long anyway, right? If it truly, see, that's the key. If it truly is below their production cost, it's got to be temporary, right? Maybe they made a little bit too much of something and they're trying to figure out some way to make a little money back from it. So suddenly some bargains appear and you're there at the right time in the right place and you go, thank you very much, bargain. Whew, cool. Okay, so the other way that you can get prosecuted for dumping by the U.S. government, you being a foreign firm, okay, so one way is selling below what the U.S. government alleges your production cost is to be at home. The other way is if you're selling it to Americans cheaper than you sell it at home. Again, don't gasp. I mean, is that terrible? I mean, flip that around. Do we want to be the recipients of the worst deal that foreign firm makes? Charge us more than anybody else? Yeah, well, we're going to prosecute them for dumping unless they do that, unless they charge us more than they charge others. Because often it isn't just how much they sell it for at home, it's sell it for anywhere in terms of actually applying the rule. What would you typically do as a consumer if you knew something was being made available to you at below production cost and it was something that you desired? Buy it fast and buy it in quantity if you have someplace to put it and it isn't perishable, right? Because that's not going to last, okay? So in our bizarre world of where politics seems to get things backwards, instead of saying thank you and grabbing all you can, what do? We prosecute them. We hammer them. And we make them raise their prices. Or more than that, we punish them and make them raise their prices. Okay? Picture this story. Suppose you walk out of your front door one morning and there's a new car parked in your driveway. Bow ribbon on it, big ribbon on it and everything. There's a little note from it that says, you didn't know you had an uncle in Mexico, but you did. And he runs the VW factory and he was thinking, give a car to all my nieces and nephews. And so there you are, brand new car in your driveway. You stop for a minute and say, wait a minute, I was just about to buy a new car. This is going to hurt the local car dealership. Take car away. Is that what you're going to do? What is your actual reaction likely to be? By the way, that's the U.S. government reaction in microcosm. No, this will hurt the local car dealer or local car producer. Get it out of here. What are you going to do? You're going to fall down. Thank you, tears of joy. Quick, run to the store, get a thank you note. Maybe he'll do it again, right? Thank you, Uncle Fred, or whatever, whatever his name is, right? And it is, by the way, is it going to hurt the U.S. economy? That the money you were going to spend on the new car, you're going to spend that on something else, right? So yeah, it may hurt the local car dealership a little bit. I mean, one less car sold that month out of all the car dealers. A rounding error. But it'll help other businesses because the money you were going to spend on the car, you'll spend on other things. Okay, so you see now you have a little bit of flavor for the politics of international trade. So why does it happen? Politicians, like everybody else, decide how much of something to do based on marginal analysis. Remember that back from chapter 1? Marginal benefit versus marginal cost. Why is it beneficial for politicians to punish dumping, to enact trade restrictions, which, as we know from chapter 2, is efficiency reducing and poverty increasing. Why did they do it anyway? Why are there thousands of trade barriers constantly on the books, despite the fact that we seem to be constantly reducing them? There's NAFTA and General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and lately the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Why are there always thousands of trade barriers to reduce? And every time because, and this will come up in a slide later on, when we create trade barriers, we create large benefits for a relatively few people, still thousands. That's likely to change votes. Okay? So the marginal benefit to the politician is, if I do this, this will likely generate some votes for me. Because the people that will benefit from the trade restriction benefit a lot. And so they're likely that could change who they vote for. How about those who suffer from the trade restriction, who have to pay more for something as a result of the trade restriction? That's just about everybody in most cases. But they each they each suffer only a little bit, probably not enough even to notice on a case-by-case basis. And even if they did notice, it probably wouldn't change who they voted for as a result. Okay, so you see the politicians doing the marginal analysis thing. Okay, if I do this, I will get some votes from those I protect from their foreign competitors with a tariff or a quota. I will not lose many votes from those I harm with higher prices, because the higher prices won't be noticeable to most people. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. First of all, shoes. Does it say on a pair of shoes, most of which are foreign made, hey sucker, because of the tariff on shoes, you paid an extra $1 for this pair of shoes? And by the way, here's the list of the people in Congress who voted for it. Have you ever seen that on a price tag for shoes? I never have. So you didn't know that the shoes would otherwise have been cheaper, but for the shenanigans in Congress. Okay? And plus you didn't know which your representative, your senator, whether they voted for it or not. Okay, but here's another example, and this one will maybe make you go like this. Why? Ever since we got even with the Europeans in the 1960s, on a trade restriction on our chickens. Yeah, this is a true story. In the 1960s, the Europeans were protecting their chicken industry from competition from American chickens. And they concocted a rule that said there was something in U.S. chickens that Americans could handle, could eat. No, but European palate, much too delicate, couldn't handle that. Got to ban the American chickens from the market. Oh, we got mad. And guess who picked up the tab for us getting mad? You probably did. Have you ever purchased a truck? Any truck? You know anybody in your family that's ever purchased a truck? There's a 25% tariff on trucks. That's where it came from. Okay, so any foreign-made truck, 25% more. Yeah, we're talking thousands of bucks. Did you know? Sure, a shoe is only an extra couple bucks because of trade restrictions. But a truck, now we're talking, 25% of $30,000. And what, $7,500? Can you maybe imagine something else you could be doing with $7,500 other than having paid it on a new truck? Okay, now, U.S.-produced trucks, including a Toyota made here in San Antonio, produced here in San Antonio, right? Doesn't have to pay the tariff, okay, because it didn't have to cross the border, right? A tariff is a tax on imports, okay? So it gets collected by customs as it comes in. And used trucks, how are they related to foreign-made trucks? They are consumption substitutes. Right? So when you get the sticker shock at Toyota, Nissan, the ones that actually come in from abroad, what do? You run down to the Ford and Chevy, right? And that drives up the price of those. Trucks are very profitable. Well, there's another reason that trucks are profitable for people to produce. It's called the CAFE standard. Now, I'll save that one for one of the next ones that's on externalities and pollution. CAFE standard doesn't have anything to do with restaurants. It's about the government's fuel economy mandate, corporate average fuel economy, CAFE, C-A-F-E. That's another reason that trucks are artificially scarce and more expensive. Okay, so as a result of this dispute with the Europeans over chickens in the 1960s, ever since, about 50 years, American consumers have been paying up to 25% more for their truck than they otherwise did. And that, by the way, that includes SUVs. SUVs are classified as, I think they're classified as trucks. See, a little moving some commas and definitions around that no one is aware of other than the people that benefit from them makes a big difference. There was a move a few years ago to try to get minivans reclassified as trucks rather than cars. And that would have drastically increased the price of minivan. I think that was defeated. All right, all of this is driven by the marginal analysis of politicians saying the marginal benefit, the vote marginal benefit for trade restrictions is positive, and the marginal cost is negative. Fortunately, but this is true all over the world, fortunately so many trade restrictions piled up and the damage was so severe that we got together and said, kind of like an Alcoholics Anonymous, almost exactly the same as an Alcoholics Anonymous kind of a situation is, we're all together destroying the world economy because of this. All the countries in the world got together to admit this. To each of us individually, these trade restrictions are individually, one at a time, beneficial in terms of votes. We've got to stop this because we're destroying the world economy. Okay, we're destroying specialization and economies of scale. I'm using terms that, yeah, I read about that in chapter 9 a little, if you read it. Hopefully you at least skimmed it. Okay, so those are things that were being destroyed by one country after another, putting up a trade restriction or of its own, or like the truck example, retaliating against somebody else's. By the way, notice that the retaliation typically doesn't eliminate the reason for the retaliation. It just piles on more trade restrictions. I don't think can you picture a world leader saying, oh, the Americans have retaliated, oh, I'm so sorry, acting like a wimp and say, oh, that was a big mistake, sorry about that, I shouldn't have put that restriction on those chickens. No, I mean, they're far too macho to admit having messed up and to back down, especially against those Yankee imperialists, right? We want to look tough against those rather than back off when we threaten them with something in return. So, fortunately, we have rules that make it hard to create trade barriers, okay, because of the mutual recognition worldwide that free trade is a good thing. But despite those rules, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, if you've seen the acronym GATT, or NAFTA, or TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, all of those are, hey, we're doing too much trade protectionism because of this marginal benefit, marginal cost thing. We've got to stop it. I'll stop if you stop. See, that's the Alcoholics Anonymous thing. Together, we can hold together. We can stop ourselves. Right? Together, we'll be strong enough to resist the temptation to create votes by protecting an industry from foreign competitors. But politicians are creative at getting around the rules, and so there still are a lot of trade restrictions despite our general agreement that there should be none and that those that exist should be gradually gotten rid of. All right, that brings us back to this, some of which I've now covered. I thought it would be more interesting to cover it with those stories. I know I might have ruined your day because you're thinking, oh, $7,500. I sure we could use another $7,500 and get that truck parked in your driveway, or your mom and dad. Wow, mom and dad, they could have given me another $7,000 to help me get through school. Instead, I went to Ford or GM or Nissan or somebody because of this trade restriction, because we got mad at the Europeans in the 1960s. By the way, note that in the 60s, Europeans were big in producing trucks. The Japanese weren't. Now, we still have the restrictions, even though the Europeans produce, as far as I know, almost no trucks, at least not for export to the U.S. Occasionally I see a VW pickup cruising around, but most of the foreign-made trucks are Japanese-made. Okay, now here in San Antonio, we're the beneficiary of that tariff in our own strange way. That's the reason why that Toyota plant's there. Right, because they make 25% more on every truck by making it here in the United States rather than making it in Japan and then shipping it here. Right, they don't have to pay that tariff. So that creates an increased demand for labor here in San Antonio. It doesn't create additional jobs. I think anybody in San Antonio, if you want to work, you find a job, but it's significantly improved the quality of jobs in San Antonio. See, that's when a politician talks about creating jobs, they're not going to create or well, they might destroy jobs if they do something really silly. But they might be successful in improving job. People will find a job if they want one. Might take a while if the economy's down, but sooner or later they'll find one. The key is the quality of employment. And see, that's another reason to have international trade. Export industries pay more on average than import competing industries. So every time you buy an import, you're creating increased demand for exports and paying wages in high-wage industries. Why are export industries high-wage industries? Because that's where we have a comparative advantage. So the difference between what we can charge for the good and what it costs to make it is large, and so that difference is payment for profit and wages and other things. Why don't import competing industries pay at higher wage on average? Well, the opposite reason, comparative disadvantage, and therefore an inability to charge a lot more than the opportunity cost of making the good. Okay, so we've done a little bit of the political and economic arguments for trade, mostly political, but we'll get into some of the economic. Trade protectionism, trade barriers make economic efficiency sense in some limited instances, and we'll get into those. Okay, so let's see. Looking at those three things and trying to think of any of those are different from the ones listed in Chapter 2. No, the second one is. Sometimes expanding the market from a domestic market to the world market allows firms to produce at lower per unit costs. Right? They can achieve economies of scale. Right? And sometimes, well, I'll leave it at that until we get to it. Now, I use the word sometimes in a couple occasions because the optimal or cost minimizing size of a firm is not infinite. It's a finite number, and in many cases, local markets achieve that just fine. But in many cases, and in many countries, especially countries smaller than the United States, if they have only the domestic market to produce in, their costs are going to be higher than if they have the world market to produce in. All right, this is back to Chapter 2, the same old thing. If we each specialize in what we're best at, the sum total of knowledge in the world will be larger than it would be if each of us tries to be Robinson Crusoe. Who's Robinson Crusoe? Well, again, I guess I'm making myself look old. But it was a figure marooned on a desert island. It must be a story from the 1950s or 60s. There was a movie about it. What happens if you're marooned on a desert island? You got to do everything for yourself, right? You got to build your own shelter. You got to make your own food. Everything. You got to medicate yourself if you get sick. Okay? So if we all attempt to do, as a country, everything for ourselves and don't rely on anybody else to do it, try to be self-sufficient, we're going to have to know a little bit about a lot, and everybody's going to need to know a little bit about a lot, and we're not going to know a whole lot about anything. Okay? Whereas if we can specialize in things, and we're going to specialize in where our opportunity costs are lowest, where our passion is greatest, where we're the smartest, fastest, because that's where we do best by specializing, then the sum total of knowledge in the world increases quite a lot. Okay, so I don't think I need to, the thing about dog walkers and closet organizers, everybody has minimal tasks that somebody in their household has to do. Can either do it themselves, and then it diverts time from what they're best at, or they can hire somebody else to do it. Now, at some point, there are transaction costs. Can you call a handyman every time something needs done? Probably not, because of the transaction costs of getting a hold of them, scheduling them, having to wait. In the meantime, you could have tightened that screw yourself. Like yesterday, one of the chairs in our dining room was wiggling a little bit. It does that all the time. I got to pick up the phone to call the handyman, and maybe in 2 or 3 days get the chair to be fixed. Meantime, either whoever's sitting on it going to fall off because the chair comes loose. No. Okay, so I pull the wrench out of the closet and do something I'm not very good at, but get along with, okay, I fixed the chair. Okay, would have been better if I hadn't been distracted, if I'd been able to go back up to my computer a little quicker and get back to work at what I do best, but didn't happen. But anyway, most of the time, it's very helpful to have people do for us even things that we're better at than they are, right? There's that principle of comparative advantage again. The brain surgeon who's a world champion at typing still shouldn't do his own typing or her own typing, right? Because it diverts time away from brain surgery, which is a much scarcer, higher value commodity. That's what we worry about Ben Carson. He doesn't look too old, the presidential candidate. Why is he already a retired neurosurgeon? His presidential campaign has a very, very high opportunity cost. All the surgery he could be doing instead of running around the country. Anyway, he's retired. By the way, I like him. I haven't decided who I'm going to vote for. But just as an economist, I'm thinking his campaign has a high opportunity cost because his other skill. Okay, then here's the one that's relatively new to chapter 9 as opposed to chapter 2. If firms are bigger, maybe it's not going to be as competitive. However, if we have the world market rather than a domestic market, then maybe we get both results. The firm can be bigger and achieve economies of scale, which means lower per unit costs by making more stuff, but still have a competitive environment because they're competing against firms all over the world rather than relatively few around the country. Think about the automobile industry. I'm trying to think of how many major producers there are in the U.S., just U.S. firms. Is it say Chrysler, GM, Ford? That's just about it. That market would not be very competitive if it were not for all the foreign firms that are willing to sell you a car or a truck or an SUV. Okay? So at the same time, Ford and GM and Chrysler can produce large quantities, enjoy economies of scale, and yet we as consumers can enjoy their competitive behavior because they have to compete on a global market rather than on just a domestic market. Also, I recall back in the earlier years when there were more restrictions on trade in cars and fewer foreign manufacturers, I remember once somebody said, again, showing how old I am, that the 1985 Ford or some year like that is 40% better than a 1980 Ford. I made a mental note then never to buy a 1980 Ford because I thought the 1985 wasn't all that great. It was 40% better. Anyway, quality is way up as a result. Cars are much better than they used to be, and part of that is just advancing technology, but part of it is you better make a good car because people have a lot of choices from all over the world. Otherwise, you're going to have to severely discount it to get it to be sold. Okay, so economies of scale and trade creates competition. Right? In some markets, like the U.S. car market, it wouldn't be very competitive without all those foreign firms in there. And we'll see from a later slide that when you diminish the competitiveness of it, it makes a big deal in the price charged. We discover some of these things the hard way sometimes. Oh, well, I'm sorry, it's this slide right here. Back in the 1980s, President Reagan was in a rough spot. There was a lot of noise in the Congress for protecting jobs in the U.S. auto industry, protecting them from loss against higher quality. Remember, this is when the 1980 Ford was 40% worse than 1985 Ford. In other words, crummy. Okay, so people were going out and buying Toyotas, and there was a Datsun then, and instead of a Nissan, Subarus and Volvos and VWs and whatever. And so that was starting to put some pressure on employment in some congressional districts, a lot of them, because of the... So President Reagan was under pressure from Congress to do something about this flood of imports that was pushing up quality and holding down price, but having an effect on jobs in some parts of the U.S. So what he did is he made contact with his counterparts in Japan and said, look, Congress is going to enact some trade restrictions, and I probably can't fight them forever. You had better voluntarily reduce your exports to the United States. Now, does that sound like voluntary if you do that? Anyway, they were voluntary because they weren't legislatively imposed on them, but it was like, yeah, if I don't do this, the situation will be imposed on me, it'll be even worse. Okay, so the Japanese did voluntarily reduce their shipments of cars to the United States for a period of time. And you see the result there. I remember at the time, some of my friends who went out and purchased a Japanese car anyway, because of the better quality, said, yeah, they're charging 1,000 or more over sticker price because of how few of them there were, because the demand was high and the supply had been reduced. Okay, so remember that if somebody says, oh, we're going to restrict imports and we'll just make more in the United States and that won't affect the price. No, it will affect the price. See, that's why that's done. In other words, that's why quotas are used sometimes instead of tariffs. It's because some people will believe that it won't affect the price. It'll just mean more American men. No, it'll affect the price. Supply and demand is a real thing. If the supply is reduced, think supply line shift to the left, the equilibrium price will increase. So the direct effect, of course, is larger. The price of the Japanese cars that were were more scarce, less available than they had been before, was increased considerably. Okay, $1,300. But the consumption substitute American car went up in price as well, right? Same thing as my truck story. If the price of the Japanese cars rises to ration out the reduced number available, there will be an increased demand for the consumption substitute. That was the reason for the pressure to reduce the imports, the exports from Japan. And so the typical average U.S. new car went up by, according to that graphic there, $660. So it continues to be in that sort of a neighborhood for the trucks too. The consumption substitute effect is about a half to 2/3 of the direct effect. So if the brand new Nissan Frontier goes up by $6,000 because of that tariff, probably the competing Chevy Colorado will probably go up by $3,000 or $4,000 because of the increased demand for those because of the higher price of the Japanese-made Frontier. Okay, so we see with an example how much lower prices are with the competitiveness that we see now compared to what they would likely be, and hopefully we won't actually ever see it, how much higher they would be if competition were reduced. And in some cases, it only takes the threat of foreign competition, not the actual foreign competition, keep prices low. Many businesses are competitive. Okay, they act competitive, even though there aren't many sellers, because the sellers are pricing, it's called limit pricing, at a level that will keep the foreigners away. In other words, so they won't be tempted to enter the market. If they charged a short-run profit maximizing price, they would make economic profit, a concept we'll get into in a couple chapters, and that would attract we got into it some already, that would attract foreign competitors. All right, here we are back at the comparative advantage. It's an important enough concept that talked about low opportunity cost back in chapter 2 that we'll review these specific examples again because there was some struggle with this before. So we probably need to get into it again. All right, so here we have a case set of numbers that says, the U.S. has an absolute advantage in both areas because it only takes us one worker, according to those numbers, to make either a computer or a shirt. And it takes 2 workers versus our one for Mexico to make a shirt. These are made up numbers, by the way. And it takes 12 times as many workers for them to make a computer, right? So we have an absolute advantage in both areas. But the opportunity cost of a computer in Mexico is much, much higher than in the U.S. And it takes 6 shirts, the amount of labor that it could be used to make 6 shirts to make one computer. In Mexico, according to those numbers, in the U.S., just 1 to 1. Okay, so what? The U.S. has a comparative advantage in computers. Mexico has the comparative advantage in shirts. We should be making the computers. They should be making the shirts. Okay, again, that's just a review from chapter 2. Again, if it was fuzzy then and you didn't realize it then until after exam 1, and now you remember, maybe you want to raise your hand and get back into it again so you don't make the same mistake a second time. All right, so we'll reprove with the same numbers that what it says there at the top, that if we specialize in trade, the total output of the world as a whole is larger than it would be without the specialization in trade. So in a sense, just by specializing, we cause things to go poof, and there's more of them. Suddenly more stuff, no more resources, just rearranging who does what, and the total amount produced increases. So let's see how that works. So in the no trade case, we just add the numbers up. Okay, let's say we have 12 workers in each industry, just to give us it doesn't matter how many, except that 12 is a nice number with lots of divides into a lot of things. Okay, but so let's say we deploy 12 workers into each industry. Well, okay, in Mexico, that is enough to make one computer, and because it takes 2 workers to make a shirt, it's enough to make 6 shirts. Okay, and in the U.S., right, 1 computer for 1 laborer, 1 shirt for 1 laborer, 12 and 12. So if we just add that up, the combined production is 13 computers and 18 shirts. So if we just move a couple of workers, okay, the U.S. moves 2 units of labor from producing shirts to computers. Okay, you see, and Mexico completely specializes in where they're better at is shirts. Now we have 6 shirts being made in Mexico rather than just the 6 before, right? 6 more from that 1 worker, from that 1 computer that they're no longer making. Stop me if okay? Being a stenographer is not very helpful here. You need to know, okay, that's where that number came from, that's where that number came from. Okay, I got it. Yes, if not, Doc, where did that number come from? Okay, so for Mexico, it goes from computers 1 to computers 0. That frees up enough labor to make 6 more shirts. Okay, so the shirts number for Mexico goes from 6 to 12. Okay, in the U.S., now we're making a little more computers, right, and making less shirts. Okay, see the shirts has gone down from 12 to 10 for the U.S., not the 12 above it, that's from Mexico. The 12 from the previous slide next to U.S. under shirts has gone to 10 for the U.S. under shirts next to the U.S. And that frees up enough labor in the U.S. to make 2 more computers. Add it up, oh, wow, look at that, magic. Just by moving some workers around, now we're making a total of 14 computers and 22 shirts versus 13 computers and 18 shirts. Okay, so a little bit of review back from chapter 2. Comparative advantage increases the world's output of stuff. All right. Now we've got to divvy up the stuff, especially Mexico has said, hey, we still want some computers. It's got to be some trade or we can't hang in here and produce just shirts. So let's see, the opportunity costs, if we go back to the first one, whoops, not that one, that one. If we go back here and we say, okay, what are the opportunity costs? 6 shirts per 1 computer in Mexico, 1 shirt per 1 computer in the U.S. Halfway in between 6 and 1 is 3.5. Whoops, make it 3, because that's what the slide has. What am I doing here? Again, I'm going through it a little faster than I normally would because we did this back in chapter 2. Between the opportunity costs is a viable terms of trade. And we'll assume split the difference. Okay, and we'll use a whole number in this case, 3 to 1. Okay, 3 to 1 is a good deal for both sides, right? Which is what makes it viable. Right? It's good for Mexico because now they only have to give up 3 shirts to get a computer rather than 6, which is internal. And the U.S. says, hey, this is awesome because otherwise they'd only get 1 shirt for a computer. Now trading with Mexico, they put a computer in a train, send it south, and they get back 3 shirts. Pretty cool. All right, so that's the basis for, okay, so now we're going to ask, how are we better off by doing this? Yes, sure, we've got 14 computers and 22 shirts, but hey, it depends on how we divvy this up. If we use the 3 to 1 terms of trade, 6 to 1 versus 1 to 1 opportunity cost in between, we can assign some dollar values to make it a little more obvious what's going on. Okay, so that means the computers would be priced typically from 3 times as much as a shirt, and yeah, it's a pretty expensive shirt, but anyway, go with the numbers anyway. And now we can show that by trading, not only are we better off in terms of quantity of stuff, but in terms of wages. Wages. So where's the dollars per hour, the salaries, where is that? Well, here's the way to think of wages. Our total output is our total income. Right now, since we're not going to consume our total output because of trade, and consume some of it, but some we'll trade away, and we'll get back some other stuff we didn't make. Okay, then total output is our income isn't exactly right. Total output adjusted for trade is our income. So applying that, right, we can find an average wage. The value, the total value of what we have to consume divided by how many workers it took to make it is the average wage. So let's use those dollar values up there and figure that out. And we'll also see why it's useful to have an absolute advantage, even though the absolute advantage isn't helpful to decide what we're going to trade and what we're going to export and import. It's still nice to have it. Okay, so without trade, okay, the U.S. makes one computer with 12 I'm sorry. Yeah, Mexico, okay, one computer with 12 laborers, okay, and then 6 shirts with 12 laborers. Okay, add that together. Okay, one computer, $300, 6 shirts times 100 each, $600, $900 divided by 24. That says the average wage in Mexico is $37.50, using those numbers just for comparison purposes. In the U.S., we have 12 computers made by 12 workers and 12 shirts made by 12 workers. And so 12 times 300 plus 12 times 100 is $4,800 divided by 24 workers doing that, $200. So you see, there's the effect of the absolute advantage. Okay? $200 wage in U.S. versus $37.50 in Mexico. So yeah, it's nice to have that absolute advantage. The more you produce, the more you have to trade, the more you have to consume yourself. Now we look at the situation with trade and specialization. There's more stuff, and we're producing according to what we're best at. The U.S. still has the one computer. Mexico still has the one computer, but now they have 9 shirts. You're saying, well, wait a minute, how'd that happen? By Mexico moving all of their labor into making shirts, they make 6 additional shirts, and at a 3-to-1 rate, they trade 3 of those shirts for a computer. Okay, so putting all their labor into shirts makes their 24 workers produce 12 shirts. Take 3 of the shirts, trade it for a computer. Now they've got a computer, just like they had before. Only now they have 9 shirts left instead of 6. Okay, so you can see one computer, $300, 9 shirts, $100, $1,200 divided by 24 workers, $50. Wow, $37.50 versus $50. That's a big percentage increase. Okay, in the U.S., we're better off too, and in dollar terms, a little bit more, but in percentage terms, much less. Okay, somebody once said that the effect of NAFTA on the U.S. economy, because of how big our economy is, was the size of a rounding error. Yeah, positive, but hard to notice, hard to detect in terms of all the other things going on. But for Mexico, it was huge, right? Because their economy is much smaller, and so their gain, what is $12.50 out of $37.50? That's 1/3, right? There was a 1/3 improvement in the wage for Mexico. Okay, so in the U.S., 13 computers times $300 each, plus 13 shirts times 100 each, divided by the 24 workers, is where the 216.67 comes from. So there's more stuff, and when it's distributed according to comparative advantage and the terms of trade being between the opportunity costs, both sides see higher wages. Questions, comments, thoughts? I guarantee that was not all clear. 100% certain of that fact, but I don't know why or how. So talk to me. What part of that equation, a number that you're going to have to put in there yourself between now and Sunday night, questions like this in the homework, what part of that would you not feel comfortable knowing how to do on your own? Which again is why I beg you to skim the chapter before you come to class, so you'll have seen this a little bit before. And now I've given it my best shot to present it, and it's still a little fuzzy, but I don't know why. You'll have to tell me, and then I can clarify it, hopefully. That's why I'm here. to try to do that when it needs it, which is far more often than I'm told. Questions, comments, thoughts, confessions? Help Mr. Wizard. Beam me up, Scotty. Yes?
I see how the formula says the number of units of labor. Where did we get the number 24? Is it just in the problems?
No, the 12 is we've assumed that we've assigned 12 units of labor to each of the two industries in each countries. Now, that's an arbitrary thing. It's just because 12 is a nice number to divide and multiply, it divides into 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. Okay, so we said a couple of slides ago, suppose we have 12 laborers initially producing computers and 12 laborers producing shirts. That's how in Mexico we got 1 computer and 6 shirts. Okay, so suppose the U.S., same thing. Okay, and then we had 12 computers and 12 shirts in the U.S. Okay, so the 24 is let's say, now we have the 24 workers, 12 in each. Okay, so we have 24 total workers. Okay, so on a homework problem, thank you. Guess what? The numbers might not be 12. Yeah, it might be, suppose there's 10 workers in each industry. All right, so don't be dividing by 12 or by 24. Right, be dividing by 10 or 20 maybe, depending on what the problem says to do. Okay, so the 12 and the 24 is just an arbitrary suppose to create the numbers in this example. Now, finding that the wages are higher when you trade according to comparative advantage, that better come out no matter what the numbers are. I was doing an example before class. I didn't have it finished in time, so I'm going to wait till next time to do it. But I got my wires crossed in there somewhere when I did the example, and I kept wondering, why am I getting the wages lower? Oh, I got the comparative advantages wrong. So I got an unmistakable signal. I said, I know the wages have to come out higher if there's production according to comparative advantage specialization and what you're best at. They came out lower, and I said, mistake made here. I got the comparative advantages backwards. Yeah, that happens. Okay? But see, when you're thinking about what you're doing rather than just robotically doing them, then you are able to detect your own errors. And, that doesn't jive. That cannot happen. A mistake. There it is. Go back and trace back through it. More Q&A on any of that. All right, we've got a lot to do, so barring that, again, online is way, 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 way underutilized. I mean, barely utilized at all. You got a question, don't lose the question by not writing it down right away and put it online so you can help yourself and others get in that discussion forum for whatever, like in this case, Chapter 9. Post your whatever's bothering you there, saying, where did that number come from? Where did that number come from? Why did I divide by this? Get right in there and put that in there, and you'll help yourself and others. Once we get it rolling, if we ever do, the online discussion, people will get used to going there because they'll say, I better go there because other people may have asked a question I didn't know to ask. Okay, and then they'll already be there, and then the opportunity cost of doing it, right, signing on and going, a little bit of effort. They'll have already done that and say, I have some questions too, and put them on there, and see, then we can get that going. And then I can come to class knowing what needs more of my time than some other things, whereas here I'm just kind of shooting in the dark, hoping to find out what's not clear to you and have you ask me about it. Okay, so here's a quote from Adam Smith, sort of the granddaddy of all economists. 1776 was an awesome year because that was the same year that Adam Smith wrote Wealth of Nations, which is like a multi-volume set on how free enterprise and capitalism works. And by the way, the newest version of a multi-volume or a huge mass of stuff on how capitalism functions is by George Reisman, R-E-I-S-M-A-N. You may wish to put that in your library to look up things every time you wonder, why do markets do this or do that? After all, you're here most of you are, because you're going to pursue careers in business. Okay. These are questions for you here. I'm not sure about the Alex Rodriguez thing. He probably is good at mowing lawns. After all, he's a baseball player, and so probably before he made millions, he probably had to mow his own places where he played baseball. But anyway, I doubt if he mows his lawn now, he makes 20, 30, 40, 50 million a year. I've lost track a lot. And so, see, if he mows his own lawn, not only does he risk injury by cutting off a toe or something, then it takes time away from honing his baseball skills, which he needs to do because I think he wants to break the home run record, and he's already 40. So he needs to eke out a few more years here somehow to get to 760 something, 70 something Barry Bonds home run record. Sorry, I need to clear my throat again here. Let me. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to do something that we didn't do back in chapter 2, and that is to use the supply and demand model to talk about why free trade is good and how free trade functions, and then to talk about what happens when the politicians interfere anyway, and we can do that with this model right here. And I drew my own version of it up there because there are some things that are, it's just kind of busy up there with that model, and I can illustrate them with my my letters and areas there, I think a little better, or kind of supplement what's going on with the models that are in the chapter. Okay, so first of all, we have our just usual supply line and demand line at the downward sloping demand and the upward sloping supply. Only now, instead of just saying supply, it says domestic supply or domestic demand. And I have the equivalent on my graph with the H. That H stands for home. Okay, so supply from within the country, from within the home country, demand from consumers residing in the home country. And now we have this additional line on there that's called world supply, S sub W. Up there it says world supply. And it's a horizontal line, so it looks kind of weird for a supply line. It's infinitely elastic, right? Use the jargon whenever you can to get used to it, right? That's back from, chapter 5. It's infinitely elastic, which means if you're willing to pay the going rate, internationally, the going rate, P sub W, which, world price, P sub W, or point B is there, if you can, you might be able to see that in the back of the room. Right, this number, P sub W, point B is, that's the going rate internationally. And so what's the basis of a horizontal supply line? Okay, what assumption underlies the assertion that, hey, you can have all you want if you're willing to pay that price? Well, the assumption or assertion is that the home country is small relative to the world as a whole, which is realistic even for the U.S. at times, although not always, right? Because sometimes the U.S. demand for a product is relatively small compared to the worldwide demand. Sometimes it's relatively large. But if the home country demand for something is relatively small worldwide, that means that any increase in the home country's demand for something will not be a big deal internationally, and therefore will not affect the international price. Okay? Horizontal supply line. And it makes life easier for us to get into the concepts we want to get into, so we'll make that assumption even though at times it's a little bit shaky depending on the product and depending on the country. Okay? So let's see. We can have all we want of this product, and because I'm kind of goofy and I believe in concrete examples, okay, we'll make this the concrete market. All right, so you can have all the concrete you want at P sub W. Why would anybody pay more than P sub W for their concrete? Well, duh. Remember, that's when you've studied long enough, you've got to duh. Okay, so yeah, it takes a while to get to duh in this case. Why does this supply line look like that, and what does it mean? Okay. That means we can have any amount of concrete we want if we're willing to pay P sub W per unit of concrete. And so if we can get all we want at that price, why would we pay any more? Okay, so the equilibrium is point E. Yeah, that'll trip up some of you who are on automatic rather than pondering, thinking, processing, thinking about what's going on, about the fact that nobody would pay more than P sub W, right? Because you're used to the lines intersecting, and this is the equilibrium. This is the no trade equilibrium, right? It says that up there, right? Yeah, no trade equilibrium. Okay, so until we did international trade, yeah, that was the equilibrium. We were assuming that there was just the domestic market, and that was it. Okay, so now we've got two sources of supply, and if the foreigners the rest of the world produces this product more cheaply than we do. We have a comparative disadvantage, right? That's what this market says, is that home country has a comparative disadvantage producing concrete. The world price is lower than what the price would be if we didn't trade. That's why we're going to import it. The equilibrium is here, right, if we allow trade. Okay, and then the equilibrium quantity would be that. Yes, you're tempted to say, well, it's what the lines cross. No, it's not always where the lines cross. Well, not where the upward and downward sloping lines cross. Right? It's where these two lines cross. The consumers are saying, hey, I can have all I want at this price, and at that price, here's how much I want. And at that price, the home country supplies that amount. Okay, so to not have a shortage, we have to import QE minus Q sub H with the Q sub S with the H superscript. Okay, so our imports is I think we've got that on the graph up there already. That, imports. All right. That increases the consumer surplus from, I know my letters look small in the back of the room. Let me go over here and point. If we had no trade, the consumer surplus would be CHF. Okay, if we had no international trade, the price would be right where my arm is, right? And the consumer surplus is the demand minus the price that would prevail without any international trade. And so HCF, okay, so let me go ahead and write that down. CS0, which means before trade, is CHF. Doesn't matter what order you get the letters in, but we'll go with that way. Okay, consumer surplus with trade is CBE. Okay, consumer surplus above the price, below the demand. The difference between value, demand, and what you have to pay for it. Buyer's gain from trade. Okay, huge with international trade at low prices, right? What letter? Okay, CBE. Okay, so the gain to consumers is BHFE. Okay, you see some of that is a little harder to describe up there because it's smaller and therefore it's hard to put all these points on there. All right, now let's look at it from the producer's perspective. Some review from older stuff as well as getting into this newer stuff. The producer surplus without trade, without international trade, is AHF. Okay, be students, not stenographers. If you don't know why I just said AHF, and that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't jive with your understanding of producer surplus, or you've forgotten what producer surplus is, don't be shy. Fragile ego is a serious learning disability. See, now here we get into the reason why businesses hire lobbyists. Because now the gain from trade for home country concrete producers is ABG. A producer surplus is quite a bit lower. BHF, BHFG. See, that's the nice thing about this model doing this. Is because without this, you can say, well, the producers lose and the consumers gain. You know, who knows whether this is a smart thing to do? Somebody's gaining, somebody's losing. We know enough from that to know there was going to be some conflict, right? Because the producers aren't particularly thrilled that somebody else is gaining. Right? They're saying, hey, we're going to do something about our losses if we can. I don't care if somebody else is gaining more than we are, less than we are, or the same amount. Okay, we can see from the model that the consumer gain from free trade, right, not getting in the way, letting people buy it at whatever price they can find, that's as low as they can find. The consumer gain from this international trade exceeds the producer loss from letting those foreign goods in at lower prices that they can't easily match by this amount here. In case you're in the back of the room, and right, this triangle right here. So if we block international trade, this is a deadweight loss. Right? If we do something that stops the trade from occurring, GFE becomes a deadweight loss. And by the way, that's something you better underline and circle in there, and the reason for it is because there's a little bit of inconsistency between my terminology, which I think is correct, and the Tabarrok-Cowan terminology, and a couple slides later on it'll become more obvious, but to not be tripped up by this difference, which by the way I wrote to Alex, a friend of mine, and said, Alex, what's the difference between the gain and the loss? That's the deadweight loss. I says, yeah, but we like to call it this and call it that, and yeah, sorry, economists are not consistent in their terminology, and so, oh well. Okay, so if we have a prohibitive tariff, for example, okay, or a quota of 0, or some rule like the Europeans did about the chickens and said, no American chickens in Europe, they're made by some chemical, or they're fed some chemical that Europeans shouldn't eat, even though it doesn't look like it's hurting any Americans to be eating it. Okay, so a prohibitive trade, a absolute trade barrier, this would be a deadweight loss. If it's not a total trade barrier, well then some lesser piece of that becomes a loss. Okay, so again, make sure you underline, circle, highlight with stars, all of that, because otherwise you'll say, but doc, that says this in the book. And sorry, there is going to be an inconsistency there. Deadweight loss is all of this. Okay, this whole triangle when trade is blocked. By the way, another little political story happens sometimes. Let's put some numbers on here. Let's say this is I help you get the idea and the concept here. Suppose there's a $40 tariff imposed on this good, on concrete. Okay, $40 tariff. Okay, and go through the numbers. The price would be $50 if we had no international trade. The $30 is the world price now, and that's the equilibrium price in country H with free trade. Okay, so a $40 tariff. What's going to be the price of concrete after that goes into effect? More? Now, see, I'm glad I asked because we nailed some misconceptions here. No, it's not going to be 70 anywhere. I mean, first of all, think about it. Let's say some little dinky country puts a $40 tariff on it. Is that going to change the world price of the good? No. No, not in the U.S. So anything that can be done to trade in this market cannot raise the price higher than $50 because this is the no trade price. Right? So, yeah, you thought, okay, $30 is the price now. If we put a $40 tariff on it, yeah, the foreign stuff will cost $70 now if we buy it. But we can then buy all we want from domestic producers at $50. Right? The price will be increased by the tariff. When it hits $50, all that people want to buy is met by domestic supply, and so the price doesn't go any higher. See, that's a trick question. Now, suppose there's a $10 tariff put on the good. Yeah, the price will go up to $40. Suppose there's a $15 tariff. Yeah, the price will go up to $45. Suppose there's a $20 tariff. Yeah, it'll go up to $50. Suppose there's a $25 tariff. It'll go up to $50. Suppose it's a $30 tariff. Yeah, it'll go up to 50. Suppose it's a $100 tariff. It'll go up to 50. Suppose it's a $1 million tariff. It'll go up to 50. Myself, 50. Yeah, now, why would a politician do that then, have a tariff of more than 50? They do, quite often. Yeah, not all that often, but sometimes. The $40 tariff, then later on they can cut it by 50% and get a headline and not change a thing as far as the producers are concerned. President X just cut the tariff on concrete 50%, right? Puts it at 40 and then knocks it down by half. Now it's only, the producers are saying, so what? But President X is going, hey, I got a good headline. I'm a free trader. Cool. So it's called putting water in the tariff and then draining it out. Excess tariff has some political advantages, right? You can con some people into thinking that you actually did something to make taxes lower and prices lower, and you didn't do a thing. Because it's still prohibitive at 20. 40 it was prohibitive, still prohibitive at 20. All right, let me see if I covered everything that's in this slide. Put some numbers on this, why not? Let's see, this looks to be about 40 and... Okay, so imports would be 80. 40 of the 120 comes from the home country producers of concrete, and the other 80 will come from imports. Now we can talk about, say, a $12 tariff. I know I said 10 a minute ago, but let's go with 12. Okay, so for those of you way in the back there, this is a 42. Okay, a $12 tariff. Let's put, okay, lowercase t for tariff, $12. Okay, so the PW is 30. So there's 42. This is a non-prohibitive tariff. There will still be imports. Okay, so now we're down to about probably about 100. And let's see, that looks to be about okay, so imports are now going to be 100 minus 65 or 35. All right, the quantity that consumers want at a price of 42 is 100, and the quantity that's provided domestically is 65, so we import 35. And how much tariff revenue do we collect? See, these are simple math questions. I know right at this minute it might still be, oh, where do we get that? But it's a way to test whether people have actually done some studying and thinking rather than just memorizing something they didn't understand. Let's see, a tariff revenue. What does that mean? That's how much money are we collecting by putting a tariff on this stuff when it crosses the border? Well, let's see, how much is going to cross the border once the price goes up by the amount of the tariff? 35 units of it. $12 each, right? No difficult math there. Okay, 12 times 35, what is that? That's 420, I think. Do the math on your calculator. I try to do it in my head. Verification. It's 420? Okay. See, I did that by saying, let's see, what, 12 times, okay, 10 times 35, I know what that is, that's 350. And 2 times 35 is 70, 350 plus 70 is 420. See, so sometimes if you don't have a calculator, you can still do some math. It's usually calculator demanding. Yes? Huh? Oh, sure. Yeah, you're right. And you're right. We should, and yeah, we're about out of time. So we're going to do one more thing before we call it a day. But while we do that, sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. Sometimes I forget to do that. And yes, you should be rewarded for being here today, since many have chosen not to be. Again, if for those of you that are rare attendees, and if you're taking it as a mostly online or sort of a hybrid course by default because you're not showing up very often because you can or whatever, If you're doing great, that's fine. Not attending will not harm your grade a bit if you're scoring big time on the homework and the tests. But if you're not, well, that says maybe you need to be here. Okay, one more thing real quick on, some of you are quickly on the attendance here. It's stuck at 39, so okay, we'll just call it a day there. One more thing here on the graph. There's two pieces of dead weight loss now with this non-prohibitive tariff. Okay, and that's where I'm going to leave it for today. The dead weight loss are these two shaded areas. What about this area right here? That's the $420 tariff revenue. What if this is an import quota? No revenue. All of it's dead weight loss. So why ever have a quota instead of a tariff? The dead weight loss is bigger. Well, remember the story from earlier? If the government announces a quota, some people will believe that that won't raise prices. And that politics is enough in some cases to incur the bigger dead weight loss of the import quota as opposed to the tariff. We'll pick this up next time and finish up chapter 9 on Thursday, and you do your homework again by Sunday night.